Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get some practice on solving inequalities. If you haven't looked at this question yet, I'd consider just kind of taking a look at it in the notes and trying your best at it. But if you're looking at some solutions, let's go ahead and let's do them together. So let's first off take a look at A. So A, I always like writing down the question that I'm working on before I go ahead and solve it. Just kind of aligns my work a little nice. So I'm going to rewrite it down. We got x minus 1.6 is less than or equal to negative 5.6. So what I'm going to do here is, again, we want to do the isolation game. I always call it the isolation game. We want to isolate for x, any terms containing x, and then we want to isolate it for it on one side of the inequality sign. And in order to do that, I'm going to have to add 1.6 to both sides. And again, I like to work vertically here, so x is going to be less than or equal to negative 5.6 plus 1.6 is going to be negative 4. And I'm going to get my answer here to solve the inequality. Now, if you wanted to represent this graphically, which I understand the question doesn't ask, but doesn't matter, we can always represent it graphically, I would put 4 in the middle, negative 4, that is, in the middle. It's a closed bound inequality, so that means I'm going to have a closed-in dot there. I can have negative 5 off to the left, negative 3 off to the right, and if x is less than negative 4, then we know that it should point towards the numbers that are less than negative 4. So that kind of solves A for us. Hope you got the same answer there. Let's move it on to B. So B, we have negative 10 is greater than 4x. Now, it's nothing wrong with this question, having x on the right-hand side like this. I don't particularly like to have that, just the way that I think about inequalities. I always like having the inequalities with x and the variable anyways to be on the left-hand side. So I'm just going to go ahead and rearrange this inequality. Don't feel the need that you have to do this, but I'm just going to kind of make a note of it. I'm going to rearrange this out. And that's going to make this 4x is going to be less than negative 10. So as you can see, the inequality is still opening up to the negative 10. These two things are completely equivalent statements. However, I've just rearranged it. So at this point, the term with x is isolated, kind of unlike A, where we had to do an extra step, but it is isolated. However, we haven't isolated the variable itself. So we are going to have to divide both sides by 4, since that's the opposite of multiplying, as you can see there. We're going to see that x is going to be less than, and I'm just going to do fractions here. I like fractions. They make sense to me, so I think I'm going to use fractions. If you wanted to use decimals, you could certainly represent your answer in terms of this. I'll just put like an or kind of a statement here instead. Or you could say x is less than negative 2.5. That would be fine as well. Just kind of like what we did from before, I think we're going to go ahead and do a graphical approach as well, just so that we are comfortable with this. I like to always put the two numbers that are closest to negative 2.5. So I'm going to have a negative 3 here. I'm going to have a negative 2 there. I can judge what the distance is between them. Well, it's exactly half, so that's going to make things a little easier for me. I'm going to put an open dot right in the middle there, and it's saying x is less than negative 2.5. Now, I didn't divide by negative, so I didn't have to rearrange my inequality or anything like that. So I know that I'm okay just going like this. And that would be my answer here. So that's a graphical approach. And of course, this would be your algebraic approach as well. Moving kind of back up to our question, we see that letter C is a little bit different. Not super challenging, but of course we do have kind of like a divided by 8 going on, and let's see how we're going to deal with that. So just kind of scrolling down, I like to do everything kind of vertically here. So x is divided by negative 8, and I believe it was greater than 3. Greater than 3. So in this case, I have my variable on the left-hand side, which I'm a little bit more accustomed to, so that's nice. But to kind of start this question off, I'm going to multiply both sides by 8. So I'm going to take this side here, and I'm actually going to multiply it by -8, and multiply this side by -8. And of course, that's just to cancel out the division by 8. But I do want to make sure that we understand that, you know what, we got to do something here. I multiplied by a negative. You don't have to really write this out for yourself, but I would really like you to think about this, because if I've multiplied by a negative, then what I do have to, take into account is that my inequality sign, rather than opening up to the x, is now going to open up to the 3 times -8, which is -24. So that's really again, a really big idea here, is that since I multiplied by or divided by a negative, I really do have to make sure that I take that into account. If I wanted to do this in terms of an inequality, we're not really in between any numbers. We're at a boundary of -24. I'll put -25 over here and -23 over here. And since that we are a strict less than inequality, I'm not going to make a closed dot. I got an open dot over here. And it looks like I'm going to go towards the numbers that are less than 24. So a little bit of rapid fire questions over there, just really solving for x in this case. These are all sort of one-step questions when it comes to that. Not really anything too bad about this. However, just make sure that you really do remember that if you have a negative sign and you're multiplying or dividing by it, you do have to flip that inequality sign. I chose to graphically represent these as well. You're totally not, you do not have to do that for this question, since it was just algebraic. However, I thought it might be beneficial to do a little bit of both there. And that should be the end of that question for us.